Hey guys, it's Dr. Tom with EBM Fitness Solutions, and in this video we're going to look at some Bandwalks. Now Bandwalks is this amazingly awesome, horrible, miserable experience that pretty much everybody hates. And they hate it because it's hard and because they need it. As we get older, we don't do as many exercises or activities, and most of our daily activities are more kind of front to back forward motions, right? We walk, we sit, we stand, we climb stairs. We don't do as much lateral type movements as we did when we were younger and playing sports. So that movement pattern, those muscles become very weak, they become inefficient, and that becomes problematic. The gluteus medius, kind of a smaller glute muscle on the side, is incredibly important for creating this motion, but also for stabilizing the hip in single leg stance, right? So if I balance, that muscle should be firing. But when you walk, when you run, when you climb stairs, do lunges, step exercises, anything where you're on one leg, if this muscle doesn't work or doesn't fire appropriately, the hip kind of kicks out, the knee can collapse in. It actually is one of the bigger causes of sort of balance issues. I've had a lot of patients that I used to see at the hospital that would come in with part of their script would be, loss of balance or poor balance or whatever the case may be. But when I tested their balance was actually normal. When we tested the strength of their hips and their glutes, that was below average. They were incredibly weak. And then when you can't stabilize here, it makes you unsteady, so you look as though your balance is poor, when actually you're just weak. There is a big strength component to balance. So as you get better at this exercise and as you strengthen these muscles, balance tends to improve just naturally. Now, quickly, there are other issues for balance problems. There can be vestibular issues. There are bigger issues that you're not going to fix with a band. But for a lot of people, it's more of a weakness issue than a true deficit with something related to their balance. So, Bandwalks. Find yourself an appropriately tensioned band. You're going to step on the band, and you're going to pull the band up a little bit, just so there's a little bit of tension. You don't want slack in the band here, but you don't need to bring it up above your head. Initially start just like this. As you get stronger, you can give it a little bit of a twist if you are so inclined. Now the idea here is to squeeze the hip, not to swing the leg. And I will show you what each looks like. It's very important. Swinging the leg, you're wasting your time basically. When you squeeze the hip, this becomes a very challenging exercise, and that's what we want. The outside part of your hip and glute should be on fire by the time you're done, and that is the goal. One thing to keep in mind, you're working both of your hips at the same time when you're doing this exercise, but for different reasons. Remember, the gluteus medius creates hip motion, but it also stabilizes the hip when you're in a single leg stance. Well, look what we have here. This side's creating movement. This side has to stabilize. So when you go in one direction, you'll find that coming back, both your hips just seem to be really struggling. That's why. It's not as if you're only working one side going in one direction. You're working both sides in each direction, but for different reasons. So just keep it in mind, and it may be worth for you switching which direction you start with, right? So first set, you go to the right first. Maybe the second set, you go to the left first. Something just to consider. So here's what we're looking for. If I'm going to move towards my right, I'm going to squeeze my right hip. But I have to shift my weight onto the left side to do that. So I shift here, squeeze, take a small step. Squeeze, small step. Squeeze, small step. If I don't shift my weight first, then things start to get messy here. Then I have to hike this hip, and in the motion, I'll move my arm out of the way so I can show you, because this, right? Then we're taking the emphasis off the gluteus medius and moving it up into the low back, kind of flank area. There's a muscle called your quadratus lumborum that gets going. We want to stay out of that. So you have to shift weight to allow this muscle to work. Otherwise, you get this kind of action, which we're not interested in. If I swing the leg versus squeezing the hip, I'll show you. I'm going to do a squeeze, and then I'll show you a swing. So if I squeeze, it's there, and then I'm here. If I swing, it looks something like that. My trunk is going this way, my leg is all over the place. I'm using a bunch of muscles, not the one I want. So There's a lot of things you don't want to do with band walks. It's what makes it difficult to do. So we mentioned squeezing versus swinging. When you move, don't turn your toes out to the side. That's your glute max trying to take over and help the gluteus medius by rotating the hip. Don't let that happen. Okay, that's essentially it's a form of cheating, so we don't want to do that. Also make sure that when you take your step, you're not falling onto the lead leg. So it's not this, okay? You've basically lost out on about half of your range of motion, right? Because if I want to go here, I want to fight to bring the leg back in, and I take my small step. It's not this, okay? That's cheating, using too much momentum, too much rocking. So focus on the squeeze, fight the tension in the band, right? So you're pushing out, fight it back, and the step that you take to come back in, it's a small step. Even though they're called band walks, you're not walking that far, and honestly, you're not going to cover that much distance. So it's out to the side, bring it back, small step. So it does become, you get a bit of a rhythm to it. Here, here, shifting your weight back and forth. Not sloppy, but there is a certain rhythm that comes with the motion. So focus on the squeeze, not the swing, and by the end, when you do these right, the outside part of your butt on both sides should be on fire.